Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this latest TM Forum webinar. My name is Mark Newman, I'm Chief Analyst at TM Forum, and today the topic of our session is Cloud and Automation, Changing CSPs Opex Outlook. So in terms of the proceedings today, I'm going to spend about 30 minutes running through some of our TM Forum slides. Then I'll be joined by this distinguished collection of industry experts, and we'll be talking around the theme. So I'd like to have with us today Satish Kale. Satish is Head Specialist Architect, North American Telco at Red Hat. Hello, Satish.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Satish. We have Karthik, and Karthik, welcome back. Karthik is Head of the Center of Excellence within Torrey Harris Integration Solutions. Hello, Karthik. Good to have you back.
Hello. Thanks, Mark. Hello.
And last but not least, Matthew Halligan, and Matthew is CTO of Optiva. Hello, Matthew. How are you doing?
Hey, everybody. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So as I say, they'll be joining me for the last 30 minutes or so. In terms of how we can get you involved in this webinar, please use the Q&A box. If you have any questions for me in my slides and any questions from the panel discussion, please use that Q&A box, and we'll either tackle those questions during the session. If we run out of time, we'll get back to you afterwards by email. But please make sure you do come back to us. We do like these things to be interactive. And we'll be sending out a recording of this session within the next 24 to 36 hours, so you don't need to worry about taking screenshots or recording. It'll be with you, say, within the next day or 2 days. So on that note, I think I shall move on. So the first thing to be said is that this webinar is based on a report which is about to be published on the TM Forum website called Inform. Inform is the name of the website that houses all of our research. So inform.tmforum.org, as a report entitled Cloud and Automation Changing CSP's Opex Outlook. Just a word of thanks to Red Hat, Optiva, and Torrey Harris. Without the participation of our sponsors, it's hard for us to bring you this research. So we're very, very grateful for you in supporting us. It's much appreciated, and we love working with you because you add a tremendous amount of value to our research. So thanks for your continued support. So I thought I should start by explaining why we've chosen this topic. I'm not aware of many other people looking specifically at cloud and automation and Opex. Indeed, the topic of Opex rarely gets covered by industry analysts at all. It tends to be more the domain of some of the equity analysts. But I've been keeping my eye on this topic for some time. I've been wanting to do what I call sort of delve into the black box of Opex to understand what's exactly inside that black box. And the reason for that is because Opex is $900 billion. It's a huge amount of expenditure. We talk a lot about spend on the network and the capex part of the business. We rarely talk about the Opex. And I think we've chosen to look at this now because we see some changes brought about by cloud and automation, which are going to have major implications for Opex and to a degree capex as well. And while we don't feel that we can answer all the questions in terms of how cloud and automation are going to actually change the total Opex numbers, we do feel that we can give some pointers. And actually, having just completed the research for this report, I can say I kind of feel we need a second edition. We already have ideas for how we can take that discussion a little bit further. So I co-authored this research with a friend of mine, a guy called Justin Funnell. He was formerly head of equity research at Credit Suisse, so he covered the European stocks. And he's contributed to research looking at how investors see telco as transformation, particularly within an Opex context. So that kind of fits nicely into the overall discussion we're having today. Being based here in the UK, I've observed in the recent 2 or 3 years, there's an increasing story to be told by operators about Opex trends. And my observation is that within the last 2 to 3 years, there's been increasing confidence from many European operators about their ability to manage their OPEX. Now, I think part of this is because when we look at the state of particularly the European telco sector, but to a degree the global telecom sector, we know that growth is a real challenge. What investors actually, what they really want to see is growth. But if they're not seeing growth, they want to see telecoms operators' ability to manage their costs. And so many operators are now talking about those cost savings, and we'll talk about that in the next slide in just a minute. Going back to investors, while clearly they welcome any news from an operator who can manage their OPEX, they see that as being a positive, they don't have a huge amount of visibility or thoughts about how sustainable that is. And that's again where the cloud and automation discussion comes in. I think many of the cost-cutting initiatives today have been a general belt tightening rather than using specific technologies to drive down costs in the medium to longer term. And then I guess the other issue why, the reason why we're looking at OPEX in some detail now is because of this phenomenal growth we're seeing. And actually, is it phenomenal? I'd say we're seeing phenomenal interest in public cloud and in solutions delivered over the public cloud. It's, in my mind, that the coming together of the telecoms industry and public cloud is probably the story of the last year in telecoms. Public cloud vendors are becoming key strategic suppliers and partners to telecoms operators. We're still at the fairly early stages in terms of translating that interest into expenditure, but let's make no doubt about it, it will happen. So we're going to see a lot of spending in public cloud, and public cloud is OPEX. So what does that mean for the overall investment picture? Is something that we feel that we should look at. In terms of OPEX categories, if you look on the right-hand side of this slide, this is our attempt to create some structure around OPEX items. And I spent quite a lot of time the last 2 or 3 months delving into operator financials and trying to find breakdowns of OPEX items. And there really aren't too many that give you good breakdowns. In fact, there's very, very few. And even when they do give you a good idea of how OPEX breaks down, their categorizations might differ slightly. So what we've endeavored to do is to try to create some common buckets across these categories. That's a process which is fraught with the risk of error, because we don't always know if our buckets are right, but nevertheless, it gives us some sort of feel for those different categories and what might be driving those different categories and how they vary from one operator to the next, from one region to the next. So I mentioned just now that that many operators are announcing major OPEX reductions over the next 2 to 3 years. These are all European telcos, and we didn't go out just to look at European operators, but reality is that most of the commitments in terms of OPEX reductions are coming from Europe, and that probably is a response to the fact that there isn't a great growth story at the moment in European telecom stocks. There's probably more confidence about growth from Asia Pacific, North America, and if you don't have that growth story, clearly you need to have another story for investors. So OPEX reductions has been that story. So many of these operators in this image have already delivered cost savings the last 2 to 3 years. So for some of them, it's just a continuation of those OPEX trends. But it's interesting the confidence with which they're giving out these numbers, and in most cases, they've exceeded their cost savings in the previous 2 to 3 years. As I say, what I hope to be able to do when I looked in detail at these operator numbers, I hope to be able to say to you, the big item where we've seen OPEX savings has been in call center. So reduction in call center staff. I hope to be able to pick out trends, but actually it's been really hard to do that. And more than anything, it seems to me more like as I say, a belt tightening across the business, and an operator requesting cost cuts from different functions and departments, and those department heads just managing those costs down. So the question then is, can you continue just with job tightening, maybe eliminating certain management tiers, or do you need to actually make some structural changes in your organization, some changes around the technology that you use around areas such as cloud and automation to deliver those sustainable cost reductions? And that's what we'll be talking about today, although, as I say, coming up with real answers, it can be challenging. So we identified, so there's 3 telcos that we found where we had enough granular data in terms of Opex breakdowns to be able to put their Opex items into these different categories. And that's BT, which is largely UK telco, MTN, which is a Pan-African group, but in this case, we looked just at MTN South Africa. And there's Ooredoo, which is a telecoms group headquartered in Qatar, but has sizable operations in also in North Africa and in Southeast Asia. So an interesting combination of high income, mid income, low income markets. In the research, in the report, we've also got some snapshots of numbers from Orange, for Orange in France, Europe and Africa, and from Telenor, but they weren't comparative in terms of looking at the timeframes. So the Orange, I think, was from 2019. The numbers from Telenor were back, I think, 2016, 2017. But nevertheless, some of the breakdowns fit in these overall categories. So just looking at the categories we produced today. So working from sort of bottom upwards. So people. So most operators today, they report people, staff, as a single bucket, a single category. And so you can see in BT, 31.7% of total OPEX, MTN, 11%, Ooredoo, 19%. Those numbers should be broadly comparable. There's always going to be the issue around contractors, for example, and whether they get included in the same way. The other interesting thing about people costs is that if you're looking at an individual function, let's take IT, for example, and you think about the total cost of the IT function, you're thinking about people, but you're also thinking about what you spend on hardware and software. So unfortunately, the way the numbers are presented means it's hard to actually look at a single department which is made up of expenditure on software, hardware, and people. The people costs are broken out, which makes it challenging to see the overall impact in terms of costs. Other items to go through here. So energy and site. So energy, the cost of running your network. So we're largely here talking about all of that spend is running your radio access network. Cost of site is what you pay for access to sites to house your equipment. Again, typically your radio equipment. We found 2 operators there, BT and Ooredoo, going to report numbers between 6.6 and 7%. End user equipment and content. This is sort of a bucket that we created. If you are, let's say, buying, if you're in the TV business, that's going to be you're going to be paying for that content. So clearly, you're going to have a fairly high expenditure on TV rights and sports rights, and it can also relate to end user equipment such as devices or middleware set-top boxes. So again, quite a large discrepancy between the operators, and it probably means they're reporting numbers differently. Sales and marketing is quite a big one, and deciding what you include in that bucket. There's probably some overlap there between sales and marketing and end user equipment costs. So sales and marketing costs, again, you look at a broad range of numbers, but certainly, after people, I would say sales and marketing probably the biggest single OPEX item. And then you have regulation if you're paying for license fees, wholesale charges, so what operators pay each other for delivering, for terminating calls. Then a big one, network IT and operations, going from 6% to 15%. So that is the cost of your network and IT. So it's operations cost, which doesn't include people, and it doesn't include, obviously it's Opex, not capex. So that's an interesting item to think about in terms of what trends might be as we move into the public cloud, and then another bucket as well. So it's interesting to look at what we see is the range in terms of these items as a percentage of total Opex, and what are the factors behind the ranges, and how this might impact views on your business moving forward. So if we think about the spend on people, MTN 11%, BT 32%. So clearly in high wage economies, you're spending a lot more money on people. So when we think about areas such as automation, arguably there's more to be gained in those high salary economies than in low salary economies. When we think about network and IT operations, proportionately, it's costing you more to run IT, network, and operations. If you're in, as I say, a low wage economy, there's a bigger proportion of total cost than in a high wage economy, because you're probably paying, maybe you'll be paying in paying a global vendor who will, where possible, look for the similar sort of pricing across different markets. Even though I appreciate that sometimes prices do level out a little bit. Sales and marketing spend, again, this is the big discrepancy here in terms of price levels. And when we think about the future of sales and marketing, when I think about the shift from omni-channel, from physical retail, call centers into digital, how does that impact sales and marketing? My suggestion would be it impacts it in quite a big way. I think another reason for that discrepancy is because we think about how much money is spent on device subsidies, and that's clearly a big part of the sales and marketing costs. Energy and site, as I say, only a couple of operators reported. So it would be nice in many ways to see the people costs spread across these different functions. That would give us a better idea of what operators are really spending on network IT and on sales and marketing. So these numbers are useful because they help you to build a global picture of what telcos are spending in different parts of their business, and that can be useful. And surprisingly, we often lack these numbers. I, as an analyst, have been frustrated not being able to find these numbers. And so, telco itself is about a $1.6 trillion industry. Some people might say 1.5 or 1.7 based on how you count some enterprise expenditure. Not all operators report their numbers. There might be some double counting through wholesale, but I think there's a near consensus. It's about that figure, 1.6 trillion. Then you can start to think about how much of that is capex, and then how much of that capex is network capex, how much of that is IT capex. When we think specifically around capex, we think about, of that expenditure on the network, how much of that is going to move to cloud? How much is going to move to software? When we think about people costs, I haven't been confident enough of this information to state it more strongly, but my suggestion would be that when we look at network and IT OPEX, the cost on people is about the same as the other OPEX items. So I think I said before about 97 billion. Did I say 97 billion? I think it's 97 billion. So about 100 billion of total IT spend is on people. Energy and sites, a lot of focus now in terms of energy and sites and awareness of emissions. Traffic goes up by 30-40% a year. Does that mean that cost of energy sites go up? There's two forces in different directions there, I would say. Okay, so it's interesting, I think, to try to thinking about these numbers to work out, to take a view on what's the trend we're going to see in terms of network and IT OPEX on a global basis across the whole industry. So let's think about what the trends might be in terms of network and IT OPEX going up or going down. So let's think about people, so people working in network and IT operations. I think it's fair to say that with the migration to cloud, with increasing automation, I think we'll see telcos continuing to make headcount reductions. I think we can be pretty certain of that. That's been a trend, I think continue to be a trend. But interestingly, we will see more people coming into the business who are highly skilled people, who are developers, who are cloud architects. So even though we'll see a lot of people, I think, leaving the business, the staff that operators bring in will be higher cost staff, and particularly with the movement from telco to techco, we do see an expansion of operators' IT skills at the moment, particularly the tier ones. Any IT or network capabilities operators buy as a service. So it occurs to me that we need to start thinking hard about what happens when operators sell their towers and they rent back access to their towers. That's going to mean a increase in OPEX, I would have thought. Maintenance and repair costs and rental fees, cost of regular software upgrades, patches and bug fixes. When we think about how telcos view expenditure on IT at the moment and the attractions of moving to cloud-based solutions, there's a case for arguing that those numbers will go down. Public cloud, we know public cloud expenditure is increasing. A number of my analyst colleagues have made estimates in terms of growth of public cloud. That's an extremely difficult set of assumptions to make. I think you can probably make it more confidently in IT than you can in network. I think the speed and direction of cloudification of the network is one that's really hard to call at the moment. And then when it comes to energy, my feeling would be that continued traffic growth probably balances out the benefits in terms of operators better managing their energy and better managing their emissions. So if we move to thinking about cloud, thinking about automation, where are we at and what are the trends going to be? And so where we are today, if you look at that little donut chart on the left-hand side, 43% of operators have moved less than 10% of their IT estate to public cloud. 33% have moved 10 to 25%. And for the operators I speak to, the view is that this migration to public cloud is inevitable. It's not about what, it's about how and when. So I think we are on the cusp of a major growth investment in public cloud usage in the IT part of the business. So then we ask the question, well, what are the overall cost savings that you can achieve through a shift to public cloud? This is, I've had a number of online conversations, just through briefings with operator vendors about how to look at the impact of public cloud on total cost of ownership. That little graph there is actually, I took that from a little online calculator, which very nicely sits on the Optiva website, which I found very interesting. So you plug in details about you as a business and how big you are, where you're based, how many of your customers are prepaid, etc. And gives you a nice calculator showing what the cost savings might be. And the figure that many cloud software vendors come back to me with is a figure of savings of 40, 50%. Some more confident projections are 50 to 80%. But it's not always easy to know exactly how to measure those cost savings. And it's quite a complex way of can be quite a complex argument to make, and there's issues there around whether you're looking on a 3-year ROI. So if you're looking at the classic RFP, the RFP will ask for a return on investment in 3 years. When we think about public cloud, most operators I speak to will tell me that you need to be looking at a sort of slightly longer term horizon, so more like 3 to 5 years, in terms of comparing the ROI for your public cloud investment. The problem with looking beyond 5 years is how many operators look beyond 5 years. More than 5 years can be a difficult argument to make, because, as I say, that really is long term for telco. And then I think there's clearly an issue around how you manage internally, how you manage your usage of public cloud. And I've spoken to a number of operators who are real public cloud evangelists and enthusiasts, but they will tell me that you need to manage your public cloud as efficiently as you manage your on-prem solutions. It needs to be run efficiently, because of the way that it's charged for means that you have to be ruthless in terms of making sure that you're using those public cloud resources efficiently and properly. So when we think about automations, so probably simplistically, when I think about automation, I think about the transition from on-prem to cloud, and cloud enabling you to build automation. And my feeling is we're still at the early days in terms of building KPIs that show you the benefits around automation. What we know for sure is that automation is going to have an impact in terms of particularly operational roles that will be required now and in the future across the whole telco business. And I think it's interesting just to look at changes in terms of employee numbers. So this is some numbers. This graph is looking at employee numbers from 2011 to 2019, and it's just to show where we're at today in terms of staff numbers. So I think in most of those operators, you're seeing some sort of reduction in headcount. In some cases, more extreme than others. So I draw your attention there to Telenor on the far left, and to KPN, which is about the 6th or 7th one along. They've made significant cuts in headcount in the last 8-9 years. The question then is how much more will they be able to cut? And I said before, I think it now requires new technology capabilities to continue with those headcount reductions. Because unless you make those significant structural changes, it could be hard to sustain those cost reductions. And I would say in other markets, we're not seeing such strong headcount reductions. In some cases, operators may be expanding into new areas. So if you're expanding rapidly into, I don't know, IoT, for example, if you're building up your own internal capabilities, you may well have those staff increases offsetting reductions in staff in other areas. Okay, so that just gives you some insight into research that we've done. As I say, it's been painstaking putting together some of the numbers around the Opex numbers. I'm looking forward to a version 2 where I'm going to dig more deeply into cloud and automation, and try and give some more in-depth views about what some of the cost implications could be. Okay, we'll move on to a panel discussion. So delighted to have Satish, Karthik, and Matthew with me. So if you'd like to put your cameras on, chaps, thank you very much indeed. Welcome to you all. And so we're going to pick off a number of themes. So I'm going to try and target these questions as best I can, but you should feel free individually just to dive in when you want to. Satish, I think we're waiting for your camera to come on. Maybe he's going to get himself a glass of water. So maybe we'll start with Matthew and Karthik. So I guess my starting question would be that I started out here with this exercise trying to think about what might the implication be when we think about cloud and automation. how much of an impact are they going to make on their cost base more broadly? And I'm just intrigued to know, you know, through your conversations, do you sense these discussions are taking place from that sort of broad cost perspective, or are discussions more departmentalized currently than that? Matthew, maybe I could just ask you first.
Sure. Yeah, I think from my experience in discussing with telco stakeholders, there are a lot of drivers for cloud enablement and automation. So it's basically cost is definitely one of the factors, but it's not the only factor. One of the key factor is differentiation in terms of moving all the customer-facing channels, the online channels, to make them cloud-friendly, cloud-native, so that in today's digital world, the amount of scale and the magnitude of consumption from the customers, your apps and whatnot, it's important for telcos to make sure that their applications don't form the bottleneck. They're not the weakest link in the chain. So it's critical for telcos to move their customer-facing applications so that they get the benefits of cloud in terms of your automatic scale, your elasticity and stuff. But yes, cost is definitely a factor. So some of the internal applications that get shortlisted for cloud enablement are driven primarily from a cost perspective. So you have the strategy perspective and the cost perspective. So we see.
So presumably, Karthik, you know, if you can both deliver customer experience improvements and make some sort of cost savings, that's going to satisfy your desire.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting discussion because, you know, the operator space is complex because there's lots of silos, or divisions of business units, and depending which business unit you're talking to, you know, at least what we see in Optiva is we kind of have to come at slightly different angles. So clearly, at a financial level, driving down the bottom line cost is a fundamental. It's a year-on-year discussion, and I think, you know, when it's difficult to drive the top line, of course, you know, everything always gravitates towards the bottom line. I think the journey has started, but I think it's still what I would call nascent. And it's nascent in terms of there's the typical discussion, which is reduce license costs, reduce operational costs, generally from a vendor into the operator or the customer. But it's also nascent in terms of like leveraging the technology, because, you know, especially when you talk about charging and billing, this area is probably the least evolved in terms of adoption of new technology like cloud and automation. And automation and cloud technology isn't new, of course. We're all used to it and we're all aware of it. But on the operation side, kind of as you look at it, they want to walk before they run, and that's understandable because they want to make sure they don't lose business continuity. They don't want to put their business at risk. When you kind of move away from the financial side and talk to the operations team, they see the benefit of things like automation, rapid deployment of the technology. I think Karthik touched on it, the ability to fail fast. But there's a skilling factor in there as well. I think you mentioned it, Mark. You know, there's an evolution happening in terms of like skill sets when you talk about cloud technology and DevOps versus what was more traditional infrastructure management. And then the last division, which I think there's a great desire is on the marketing space, which is really the top line. How can we actually deploy new value propositions? How can we differentiate ourselves quickly? And they're less interested on the technology, but more the business value. And all of us need to be able to talk in those languages to those different departments. But there's definitely a desire. I just think we're at the start of the journey. We're not on the back end of the journey.
And
Yeah,
when
Mark,
you talk
I hope
about
you can
that,
hear me.
Matthew, and you talk about business value and costs in different departments, you almost need to have different storybooks for who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And so what storybook am I getting out today? And does that work? Is that a good way to make decisions? And can you work in that way?
Well, I think you still have to have a consistent message from the top level down. And there's two different messages, of course. One that helps the bottom line and one that helps the top line. Yeah. And they're both complex. Yeah, and depending on the group you're talking to, and I'm not trivializing this, of course, but the operations team, as an example, they will be more focused on how they streamline their operations.
So it's actually quite a straightforward argument for them, isn't it? You can actually sort of create a cost analysis reasonably, I say easily, but you can do it.
Yeah,
because the business value is a hard one, isn't it? Because
so
business value.
That's the one that I think is grey and a bit more nebulous for sure. Because what you're trying to do is show the value of innovation and be enabling them to differentiate. But some of that problem we as vendors can't solve because it's the operator themselves, the CSPs that need to solve it. But we need to help them understand that with these capabilities, they can move faster. If they have the ability to move faster, as in like the business packages, the offerings, the know-how of how to differentiate themselves in the market.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. And Satish, I know some of the work that you've done recently is around intelligent automation. And if we take that discussion, I've been thinking when I was speaking to Karthik and Matthew about cloud and public cloud, but when it comes to intelligent automation, is it exactly the same sets of issues and discussions that apply in terms of different stakeholders having different requirements, looking at potential solutions a different way? Or is it more straightforward?
Oh, no, it's not straightforward, but I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah, we can hear you well, fine.
Okay, fine. Yeah, sorry about that earlier, but absolutely right. When we look at, there are two areas that are, really spun up. The 5G, a lot of CSPs have invested huge amount of money in acquiring the bandwidth and the spectrum, and they want to do monetization faster. At the same time, cloud adoption has increased. So initially they started with non-network workloads and started moving them onto the cloud and eventually getting even the network workloads onto the cloud. And in all of that, they still have to maintain two worlds, the old world and the new world. And hence the operational cost has increased. And this is where just having a modest goals of doing infra and network automation may not just be enough. They may have to expand it beyond into building their self-healing network, remediation, rather than rectifying some things, if they can prevent something from going bad and affecting their SLAs with regards to service availability. This is where intelligent automation comes into the picture. And this intelligent automation that we have found out, that more and more CSPs are investing into is on their overall goal towards AI ops. Now, what they're doing, as you said, they're trying to open up this automation part, in a way that they include some very critical decision-making capability inbuilt within the system itself, automation system itself. So if it means getting a rule engine like Red Hat's decision manager or something like that, they have done that so that they can delegate it, that intelligence piece, to a specific technology component, which can be accessed by both technical staff as well as the business staff, and together they can collaborate in building these policies or mechanisms of how to provision stuff or how to remediate stuff, when to accommodate new requests and when not to. These kind of complex situations or complex requirements can be easily handled because of the intelligence piece of it. So coming back to the Opex, reduction of Opex goals can be achieved to the level that you want. When you're talking about double-digit productivity or double-digit optimization, you cannot do that with just plain old automation. You have to do intelligent automation.
Okay, thanks, Satish. Can I just bring us back to one of the points in my broader discussion here, which is, when we think about cloud and automation, which elements are Opex and which are capex, and what the implications are for, I guess we're really talking capex to Opex, and is that an issue or is that not an issue? And I kind of pick up, mixed messages on this. Generally telcos don't like shifting from capex to Opex, but if it genuinely results in cost savings, they're likely to do it. So where do you think we're at, Karthik? In terms of the solutions that you provide, is it always clear to you what's capex and what's Opex, and how important is that for you in terms of winning customer support?
Yes, it's quite important to classify exactly what falls in the capex bucket and the opex bucket. So one of the areas that we have seen from our experience is the cost of maintaining legacy applications, your legacy VSS stacks and other telco applications. They pretty much fall under the capex tab. So transforming legacy to cloud native is a good example of moving that from the capex bucket to the opex bucket. Of course, there is a step involved. There are a lot of processes involved in transforming an application because legacy applications have evolved over the years and it's not as easy as lift and shift. So we have a legacy to cloud native kit, which has a step-by-step process to break a legacy system down, again, for applications where you have full control. And we have a set of integration tools to transform those legacy components into a cloud native model. And when you use the cloud native model, you obviously get the benefits of the automatic scale. You get the power of modularity through microservices. You have the service mesh to take care of the routing. So these elements drive more and more efficiency in operating your environment, which though transforms the cost from the capex to opex. If you see the benefits, ultimately the benefits you gain from investing in a opex model for legacy to cloud transformation, it weighs more than maintaining it in the classic legacy way.
And do you win that argument most of the time?
Yes, because legacy, we have seen the telcos, it's a big pain area. It takes months for a simple tariff change. I mean, the kind of one of the telcos that we have worked a couple of years back, because of the way the data model is intertwined between the legacy applications. It takes up to 2.5 months to make a very simple change to the tariff plan. It has to go through the release process. It's a data change. It needs to go through this. So with the cloud native model, it's all about continuous deployment. So what used to take months just takes weeks, and in some instance for simple tariff plan, it just takes hours. So if you kind of describe the cost benefit in terms of a before and after scenario, it's quite easy to kind of create a business case and convince the stakeholders to make the shift.
And when you have those discussions, Karthik, is it always clear to the operator and to you what all the cost implications are? Do they see all of their costs? And is it totally
initially they don't.
I
mean, that's where we need to work together. It's not as easy because there are a lot of parameters and moving parts in a legacy system. So you have to factor in the kind of the nature of the legacy system, the type of hardware it's running, the skills required to operate the legacy hardware. So there are quite a few elements that we have documented in the kit, which need to be enriched as we go along and as you encounter many scenarios. And when you demonstrate a model from your past experience in terms of the different cost elements, then it becomes clearer because when it comes to legacy systems, there are common elements across telcos in the way these legacy systems have evolved. So it could be, let's say, a BSS product stack. A very classic example that we come across is a BSS product stack that the telco has acquired in 1999, for example, but that has not upgraded for years for whatever reasons, right? So in those cases, it becomes important to kind of help the telco transform into a cloud-based BSS model, or look at decomposing those components into a modular microservices-based framework. So then the kind of investment cost needs to be separated, the operational cost needs to be shown, and the cost of maintaining the legacy in the old school needs to be shown. So, and combine that with the differentiation that the telco will lose in terms of going to not being able to go to the market faster to launch the offerings. It becomes much more easier to kind of create a business case.
But that's kind of the conundrum as well, Karthik, in some ways, because what we see a lot is the risk of business continuity outweighs the opportunity. Yeah. So as you talk to the operator, of course, they have these systems that they've had in their networks for years. They trust them, they work. But of course, there's these limitations because of the technology they were built on in terms of the ability to roll out, as you said, faster time to market, services, packages, fail fast, iterate quickly. But on the flip side of that, and that's why for me, it's a journey, is kind of, you need to give them that path over time that they can evolve their technology to satisfy their business case. But because I'll be very honest, we came at it sometimes purely from a technology perspective and failed because the technology sounds great, it solves all the problems, but they still have a business to run. And they need to find that journey. And there's opportunities and inflection points. Like 5G gives you an inflection point. If you've got a new brand that you're releasing, that gives you an inflection point to get onto it, to build your confidence. Because they also need to get confidence in the vendors that this can actually be fulfilled. Because there's a big promise. Yeah, there's lots of different, modeling that goes on. But the reality is still they need to service their customers today. Yeah, and that is a challenge. That's a concern I see. Yeah.
I agree with you.
Right.
I mean, legacy and the cloud native will always coexist. And in fact, we have always present three models of evolution. As you rightly said, it's a journey. So model A is basically a coexistence of your legacy application along with some of the components, the good candidates moved into a cloud native model. Model B is using a combination of your legacy, your existing systems through integration, and use of SaaS-based cloud applications for some of your basis components. And model C is a combination of all, where you use the right mix of legacy, using integration to retain your existing applications, and progressively move to a SaaS-based model. So I do agree with you on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a mutually exclusive paradigms. Coexistence of heterogeneous and different generational systems to coexist and work together in harmony. But at the same time, the amount of investment they have done for the modern technology, especially the 5G, the edge computing related part, it comes with a very solid understanding of what the future lies. Whether it is about the massive spurt, exponential rise of services, new service generation opportunities, whether it's on the healthcare, on the manufacturing, or these service providers, these telecom service providers, it's going to be huge, especially the 5G. Now there has been even more disruption with the COVID pandemic thing. Like the most of the capacity which was consumed on the business districts and all those things is now being spread out across that, which means that coming back to the automation planning and all those charts which Mark had shared earlier, they're getting revamped all the time, primarily because the operators not only on one side have to juggle between the 2-generation or 3-generation systems, but on the other side, not lose track of the new, faster rollout of services so that they can monetize on those investment as soon as possible. And this is where having a somewhat infrastructure agnostic underlying layer helps them, saying that, let us have something where both the old and new systems can work together, as well as at the same time, it is modern enough that you can roll out new services, new things, whatever Karthik mentioned earlier, fail fast, do things in a more agile manner. And this is where something like container technology comes in handy. So most of the time when we are talking these modernization discussions, cloud discussions, at least from Red Hat side, invariably our discussions then revolve around what we have, an OpenShift container platform. And why is that? Because of this understanding is that we can't pick and choose between what are our priorities. Both are priorities, and we need something which will help in both consolidation, optimization, faster rollout, and agile deployment of new services.
Thanks, Satish. That's great.
Yeah.
So a question just coming in here on the same theme, which is, given that we're talking about sometimes a migration away from capex to opex, does that mean that you as technology partners need to win arguments with the finance functions, or is it just beyond you? I mean, is it not possible to touch those functions and the procurement team kind of manages that relationship? Matthew?
Well, so traditionally, getting access to the finance team and culturally changing them is more than I would say a challenge. To be perfectly honest, but the way we've approached it and are approaching it is kind of, we don't start with the capex, opex. I think maybe Karthik mentioned this. We start with the total cost of ownership. So we just say, for you to deliver this is what it costs you today, and for you to deliver this tomorrow or along this journey, here's the actual cost structure. and how it evolves. And we then kind of layer in underneath that, okay, what would traditionally be CapEx, what may move to OpEx, especially when you have a full kind of SaaS-based model, but not necessarily deliberately saying, you know, kind of bare metal versus private versus hybrid versus public. It's kind of, we give them the tools to decide where they mix and match. And we don't really kind of drive their way that they want to structure their accounting. We just give them the data. And for me, I think that makes most sense because different businesses, and I think your survey highlighted this as well, it varies. An MVNO will have a very different model of operations to say a tier one operator. And they'll also have a different way of how they're actually evolving their business as well. So yeah, for us, start with TCO, layer out basically what may move in a traditional sense of CapEx or OpEx, but don't dictate it. Yeah, let them make that decision themselves on what works for their accounting models.
Yeah. Thanks, Matthew. Satish, if I could come back to you on around automation, I think that there's a fairly mature discussion that we've been having around cloud, the migration to cloud and TCO, and which applications will move first to the cloud, and is it 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? We talked about the IT. You could talk about the network as well. When it comes to automation, my sense is that we're at the fairly early stages of understanding exactly what the power of automation could be across the business, and what that sequencing looks like, and how transformative it could be to the telco business.
Oh yeah, Mark. I mean, there has been a greater understanding of the importance of automation now, okay, compared to maybe 2 years back, where people were just focused on something else. And this is where we have reached a stage where almost everyone understands that automation is not an option, but a mandatory thing they have to focus and invest in. But as I said earlier, majority of the people still think about automation only in the context of network and infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? And this is where there needs to be more effort made, okay, in terms of making them understand that it affects the core business area of customer service. So obviously they exist to serve the customers, and customer service, whether it is about maintaining the SLAs, maintaining the service, okay, or making sure they stay in a business by providing cost-effective, competitive, newer services that are there in demand. And this is where, just talking about, as I said, 5G is a big disruptor. Okay, everything as a software, that has been a key enabler in this particular context. Cloud coming in, okay, which means that whatever your demand, your increase in demand, whether it is on the network capacity and all those, that storage capacity, everything is increasing almost exponentially. And this is where the widespread usage of cloud native network functions, okay, that is there. They want to use this to overcome the constraints of the legacy network infrastructure. And this is where the centralized and a programmable automated control center can help. Okay. And this is where you want to increase, when you talk about maturity, okay, it's a very evolutionary approach. We're not talking about replacing, ripping it. We're talking about coexistence of whatever assets they have created, whether it is about OSS, BSS application assets that are there, whether it is about any existing automation assets that are there, or the new things that are going to build, whether it is about hybrid, on-prem, whether it is about virtualized, cloud-based, cloud plus containerized, those kind of infrastructure, okay, foundations that they have laid. We're talking about automation or intelligent automation, something as being, okay, more synergetic and trying to exploit and trying to make them work even better, rather than being very, okay, what do you call, disruptive in a negative way, like I'm going to rip and replace and something like that. And this is where, again, with I'm taking a bit longer, okay, explaining automation, going beyond just the infra and network automation, we have to think about automation as end-to-end whole thing. We're talking about business process management as a business automation angle to it. So when we talk about intelligent automation doing automatic network provisioning or automatic configuration changes or network slicing and all those fancy new use cases which are there. By the way, they are not more fancy, they are necessary. And when we talk about it, there is going to be inevitably fallout management that has to be accounted for. What happens if this thing doesn't work? You'll still have human intervention. You'll still have to send someone some technicians to fix stuff and all of that. And this is where a good collaboration between various different technologies, which probably never work together with each other that often, like infra automation and network automation technologies with the business process automation, will come in together so that you can do more better human and machine collaboration. So this will help to cater the customer needs, which is again promised SLAs, the services, newer services, and especially with the huge investment they are doing in right now, the increasing operational costs can be reduced by having these intelligent solutions, which will help them not only extract the value out of existing assets, but create new assets, okay, in a faster way, or in a way that Karthik mentioned, okay, in terms of roll those new services out, okay, sooner. And again, and last thing, okay, is that the heterogeneity on the services offered is increasing. They're no more competing against the traditional service providers against each other. They're competing against streaming providers, the content, and most of these service providers have the fingers into the media business as well. And this is where common intelligent automation technology will help them, okay, roll out those assets and utilize them better.
And Satish, what are the key enabling capabilities or technologies that operators need to be put in place right now to enable them to properly leverage intelligent automation in years 2, 3, 4, and 5?
I primarily divided them into 3 areas. One is that, okay, when we talk about automation, it's not an afterthought. You have to think about it beforehand, even when you're doing planning. Okay, so that's one thing. Second one is, as I said earlier, okay, to create and build an automation platform which is agnostic to a particular infrastructure type or a particular domain, like not network and infra and business. So create a more common, okay, automation type. And third one is skills enhancement, or skills, okay, building skills and capacity, okay, about how to utilize this particular better. So the first part, it's planning and all those things, is that where do you provision your 5G equipment? Okay, how do you provision them? How can I remotely be able to control it and, okay, switch on and off or reboot or something like that? These are all going to be very important aspects when it comes to reducing their operational cost, especially with regards to providing, okay, sending technicians every time, fixing it, loss of revenue because the service is out or something like that. So that is going to be very critical. How you plan, that where do you place your equipment, how you can optimally assign them, how I can optimally send, in a very optimal manner, send the technicians so that they do most of the jobs within a shorter duration of time. That's going to be very key. That's where the automation and intelligent automation comes in handy. Second one, as I said earlier, you're going to coexist for a long time, the old and new systems. There are going to be a lot of other domains that you're going to be working with. And this is where a common automation platform, and I say not one technology, it is a combination of multiple technologies because each one are special in their own breed. Like we have Red Hat Ansible, which does infra and network automation well. Then we have a process automation manager as a technology as well, which does well. Can we make them work together so that we can have end-to-end automation in place? And don't worry about what that automation, like if you don't get a permission from a city council to dug up for a particular duration, can your business automation technology provide that alerts or those particular fallback mechanisms, which will trigger some network automation of additional capacity and rollout? These are some of the examples where both have to coexist. And the third part is the skills development. Everybody's trying to become a digital service provider. Okay, and this is where there's a huge shortfall in industry about people who can not only have the network, okay, the core network knowledge, core infrastructure knowledge, but also have the more modern automation, intelligence related ideas and concepts, okay, in there so that they could implement it. So that is going to be a big challenge in terms of acquiring that suitable talent to fulfill all those higher goals that are there in the place.
Thanks, Satish. And so, Karthik, how, for the telcos you work with, how clear is that roadmap of how to move from where we are today into cloud motive, into the use of intelligent automation solutions? Is clarity emerging in that roadmap?
Yes, I mean, just to add to what Satish said, I completely agree with him that telcos generally have been looking at automation from an infrastructure perspective. But today, automation has a completely different meaning in telcos because they're looking more at a business automation. So when I use the term business automation, I mean back in the years when telcos look at their partner ecosystems to kind of make some of their core telco capabilities accessible to their partners. There used to be a long process that used to take weeks. You sign up forms, you exchange emails. And today we are talking about an automated developer portal and exposure of APIs, where the consumption is made possible through a completely automated workflow. So you don't even know who your partner is if you allow an open API ecosystem, digital ecosystem, that is. Yeah. So that's the kind of shift I'm seeing that telcos have gone through from the last couple of years to now. And to extend this further, built on APIs, telcos are further looking at combining their core telco offerings and combining it with adjacent industry verticals to create whole new digital ecosystems. And obviously, this is based on the TM Forum Open APIs model and the digital framework. So this kind of takes automation to a whole new level, and this is the kind of shift that I'm seeing.
Thanks, Karthik. So I can see we're nearly up to the hour. So Matthew, I'm just leave the final word to you. So are we moving fast enough?
I don't think we're moving as fast as we can move, but I think it's also understandable on some of the, I think that the confidence that's not there yet on the operator side on whether there can be a realization of, I think, the promises that are getting made maybe by the vendors. That said, I think I just want to touch on one thing, and we only touch on it at the end, is it's not going to be one technology. It's going to be many technologies. It's not going to be a point in time. It's definitely going to be a journey. And I think, you know, we can talk about being cloud native, and this has been focused on, say, automation. But to be automation native, you need to have an open ecosystem. Yeah, and it's fundamental. And I think the guys touched on it there as well. And I think that's going to be the big part of the journey, getting all the pieces of the puzzle. And it'll not be one framework; it'll probably be multiple frameworks.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, Karthik, and Satish, thank you so much. It's been a great discussion. I enjoyed it. Thank you for all your questions. Apologies if there's some we didn't answer, but we will get back to you by email. So thanks for your time, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.